Sorry about this. I know you're joining the session with us in the middle, so I'm just going to very briefly recap what we are doing. Obviously, then what I'm going to do is obviously send you across the recordings of the previous session that you can listen into and obviously see and come back when we obviously do the repeat of this particular unit, in this term or the next term. Then we'll try and cover it up for you in particular. Now, very briefly, we are looking at doing. We've actually started this unit, which is Personal and Professional Development Unit 5.9. I think about 3 weeks back. This is the fourth session that we are doing in this unit. We've covered Learning Outcome 1, Learning Outcome 4, and part of Learning Outcome 3. Now, today, what I was looking at, doing in particular is covering, the reasons why we look at continuous, professional development, or CPD. And I'm going to try and relate that to how you will use the process of, continuous development to be able to develop your own personal development plan. And this is something which is, obviously a direct requirement for the assignment brief on task 3, LO3, Learning Outcome 3. And then, we have to review this. We've developed this for Learning Outcome 2 and then review it in Learning Outcome 3. So if you are able to successfully review and create your own PDP on the lines of what we have shared in terms of a template, then what will happen is this particular document that you create and then you review will actually become will actually become the actual part of your assignment when it is submitted to the for certification purposes. So this particular task is quite important, and it's important for you to get it right, because it will end up reducing a bit of work that you need to do at your end when obviously looking at doing this particular unit. It is quite a practical unit, so it depends. The theoretical aspects of this are in Learning Outcome 1 and 4 only. Most of the bits in terms of tasks that we do are predominantly practical. So we have to do things like understand the process of development. We have to look at how do we do a skill audit, how this SWOT analysis done from your own perspective on your strengths and weaknesses, and then we use that to be able to develop some sort of a continuous or a personal development plan. And that personal development plan that we is predominantly a working document, and that working document helps us review it. It's a working document. You make a plan which could be 12 months, 18 months, or up to 3 years in duration. And once you have that document available, it is called a working document. And that working document essentially is reviewed every 6 months or whenever you have an annual appraisal. And you again look at, going through the whole exercise of reviewing your strength areas, your weakness areas, your opportunities and strength, and then update that plan so that you're continuously looking at reskilling, continuously looking at gaining, new skills, which will help you perform your job roles and responsibilities much more efficiently and also effectively. Now, so far what we've done is that we've looked at a template of a PDP. The one that we normally recommend, and it's a fuller template, is the one that we come across from CMI, which we use, or from Chartered Institute of Personal Development, which is CIPD. And that particular template is what I have shared earlier. And with that particular template in mind, what we've done is we've also looked at a bit of a SWOT analysis, and I'm going to be trying to send that across to you on the emails on this, but it is also on Moodle you can access. Now, this is also an example of a CPD or a PDP template, which basically is a working document. It covers, basic aspects of things like which we are going to go through today in the presentation, is things like what do I need to learn, if there are some aims and objectives that are set, how will I go about achieving, and then what are the resources or areas of development in terms of support that I need to be able to achieve those objectives, or the skills that I want. And then how do you define milestones or success criteria? That means we look at something called SMART goals that you have to set so that you are able to progress steadily on that particular goal and objective that you have set. And at some stage, what we do is we put some sort of a target date, which is completion, or when you would have kind of confident that I've achieved this particular skill, or I have mastered this particular skill, and that then becomes something which is a part of your your experience or your skill set. So an example here that I would give is that, say for example, what I want to do is I want to learn French as a language. Now what I would do is I would kind of define that I am. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then what I kind of tend to do is I will define here that I am looking to learn French as a language, but at what level? Because I'm not a native speaker of French as a language. So whether I want to look at beginners, whether I want to look at intermediate, or I want to look at advanced learning. So I set some sort of a goal, which is that I want to be able to learn French because I'm going to be looking at job opportunities, or my company is looking at transferring me to France, and that is where they require a bilingualist or person who can actually speak French, fluent French, and also converse in English. So what will I need to do to achieve this? I might need to get some professional coaching, maybe attend some classes, buy a few books, and also try and change my habits in terms of viewing TV. Like I might watch François Cat, which is the French news television, or maybe go to a French cinema once a week. So those are things that you want to look at, how you will look at achieving, and these are the areas that you will basically put in place. So I'm looking at achieving because I'm looking at joining the class, say for example, or a course for a period of 6 months. I am, what am I going to do to be able to achieve this is join classes, say with Alliance Française for about 6 months. I might go and attend French cinema, watch a French movie to try and look at picking up the dialect and the lingo. And then resources that you would put in place would be books, things like maybe going across to meet a group of people or join a few clubs, which will be specifically clubs which are French-speaking clubs, so that you're able to converse and pick up the language and rehearse and also revise the language while you're learning. And then how would you define your success criteria here? Would be that the success criteria would come across that if you've set a timeline through this SMART goal, that something that is specific as an objective, that to learn French at beginner's level, that is a specific objective. Now you look at M, which is measurable. That means you will put some sort of a timeline in place. In 3 months, I should be able to speak, or probably become a beginner, because I would have had a vocabulary or acquired a vocabulary of between 600 to 800 words. And that would mean that you have kind of, set a plan, set a target, which is measurable, and kind of achieve that because about 400 to 600 words as a target that you've set in the French vocabulary. And at some stage, when you're able to converse and start speaking small sentences in French, would mean that that would define your success criteria, that yes, I can clearly say that I'm able to converse, even if it's smaller sentences or, a few words that I can speak in French fluently. That means that, you are kind of moving in that direction, and you're keeping track that you're making progress. And then a timeline would be that, okay, if your company is posting you or asking you to move to, say, a region in France, say by 10 September, then you've actually put a plan 6 months in advance, and then you're kind of breaking it up into, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks to try and see that and measure the progress that you're making. So as a document, this can take any form, but basic things that we define are these 4 basic things that you define as far as, a personal development plan is concerned, so that there is something which is you set as a target. Once you have set a target, you know how to go about achieving that target or that plan. And then when you look at achieving something, you put a plan in place which consists of resource support or things which are required to be able to achieve that plan. And then at some stage, what you do is, in order to say that you're progressing, or in order to say that you're making progress, what you do is you define a success criteria and put a target timeline or a target or a timeline in place to measure it against that. And that, if you have these 5 basic elements, then that document kind of gets into that shape of being something called a continuous professional development plan or a personal development planner. And what I'm going to do is, there are 2 templates that we've shared, but you're free to draw your own template up. This one in particular is a template which obviously will become a part of the assignment if you follow this, or a template which basically looks something like this, which is a draft I've also shared. and it talks about, the same basic, columns or rows, that what is your goal? You put a start and an end date. So the timeline has actually moved from the end, but it's moved here in the middle. What are the resources available are basically, the resources and support required. And at some stage, what you're looking at doing is anticipating some problems, or, the goals that you put in place actually also then becomes a template for a PDP. So here, what you've done is you've kind of defined it in phases. That means in the first year, 2013-14, I'm going to do this. 14-16, I'm going to do this. And, so this is a 3-year or a 4-year kind of a plan which has been made, which kind of, puts the personal development plan for a student who I think predominantly was here on a student visa from abroad, was looking at completing a master's qualification, and he or she has actually made this as a plan which depicts how he or she is going to track the personal development across a number of years, and major milestones or major goals have been actually plotted on this particular draft. And then towards the end, what you do is you basically define in your own words, so that if somebody is to look at your plan or your personal development plan, what they're able to see is see the plan and then get a gist or the summary of, how you're going to progress about it, or, make progress, and why you made this plan is something which is something that you write to describe your, PDP. Is that okay so far?
Yep.
Okay. Now, in terms of how do we develop a PDP and what kind of activities or tools and techniques that you can look at to create this is what I'm going to do and cover with you in some sort of a presentation that I put up here, and we're going to run through it. Now, the other bit, this is one particular deck of slides or presentation that we've been going through on a session by session basis, just to say what we are covering and what are the aspects of this particular unit which are left. So it basically talks about, we've discussed self-managed learning, how the process of self-managed learning happens. We've looked at various personality types. We've looked at the various styles of and places where you can learn. In terms of self-managed learning, it can happen through these broad, areas like attending seminars and conferences, getting into group discussions, looking at debates, social networking. Internet is a great source of information nowadays, and we consume information through mobile phone, tablet. We have various news boards that we are subscribed to, emails we are subscribed to. So that all is a process of self-learning. Then at some stage, what we've done is we've differentiated SML, self-managed learning, from lifelong learning. Now, lifelong learning is a process which leads to the development of PPD, and it raises awareness in the individual, in the self, to look at what are the areas of development that you would need support on, and that part of learning will require professional experience. It will require professional support, and that part of learning might not be just personal, which is in the case of self-managed learning, it's mostly personal because you're acquiring knowledge. But in the case of lifelong learning, that learning could be personal and professional. That means it could come across from the experience, from your workplace, and from other trainings or other forms of trainings that you attend or go through in the process of coaching could also be included, mentoring could also be included, and that allows for you to be able to look at something called lifelong learning. Now, that's next, at some stage, what we've done is we've gone through the understanding of why a PDP is required, and how do we create a PDP, what are the activities required to create a development plan, and then how do we undertake a review is something that we are looking at through the process of skills audit, through a SWOT analysis, and to develop a PDP and review the PDP every 6 months to try and see if we are on target, on goals, and achieving or not achieving, or if we need professional help, because that is something that you're not able to manage on your own, and that moves from the domain of SML, self-managed learning, to lifelong learning. And the bit which is now going to be looked at, so what we're going to do now today is go through the process of understanding how to develop PDP, and I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty of it. And the bit which is pending now in the unit, which we hopefully should cover in the next session, would be the bit that we want to look at, things like work-based problems. And that is essentially learning outcome 4. And that is what we will look at covering in the next session. So we look at things like, we've looked at transferable skills. skills which you gain and acquire through the process of lifelong learning, and those skills or the abilities that you acquire at some point in time become transferable, and you say that I have skills or I have developed skills because of my experience which have become transferable. That means if you were an IT and telecoms professional and you then moved over to get into a different sector, say for example customer services or retailing or something like that, you're able to bring your skills that you acquired because of your past experience in that sector and implement those same skills into the new sector or the new job that you're getting into. And that's why these skills are then called transferable skills. Now, there are other things that we will look at which are in work-based problems, things like time management strategies and why and how these work-based problems occur. How do we resolve them through the process of training and development is what we will cover in the next session. So that is where the gist of what we have done so far in terms of the unit, is a bit of a summary. But just now, focusing on going back to what we want to be able to do is get this on paper, because I know Phil, I think I didn't send across the email which I was which I promised that I will send across last time, but I'm going to do it today immediately after the session because I've got the content and the material ready. But what we want to be able to do now is bring ink to paper and obviously put this, plan into place, which is your PDP and your SWOT analysis. And I think, Sundar, what I would suggest is when I send you some of these templates, for you to read and look at, my suggestion would be for you to also look at putting and developing some sort of a draft, on your SWOT analysis, which is your strengths and weaknesses, and areas that you see opportunities in, or areas which are threat areas that you need to develop those so that you are able to turn your threats into opportunities, then into your strengths. So at some stage, what you have to do is look at developing your personal development plan, which consists of macro aims and objectives, or overarching bigger aims and objectives that you want to look at, and they need to be manageable, and that's what we'll get into at some time. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. Now let's look at this brief presentation, which is basically looking at the process of something called continuous development. Now, I think in the past, professional development. So just to look at distinction when we say what is personal development. So personal development is nothing but a set of activities which improves your awareness and identity and helps you develop talents and potential, which helps you overall increase your, say, for example, in the context of employability when we look at in the organization, and it also helps you realize your own personal dreams and aspirations. The word personal means that it is very, very specific to you or yourself. And anything that you do to be able to develop your personality, or say, for example, develop your physique, or develop your delivery, presentation skills, is all directly going to affect you, in particular your environment and how you come across in that environment. So personal development as a process is nothing but a series of activities or series of steps that you take to improve overall your own presence as far as the public is concerned, or improve your own presence within the circle of your friends, for example. And that is the process that you look at saying, a typical example that I take, just going away slightly, would be that if somebody is looking at, the process of, training as an athlete, if you're looking at training and you're training for, say, for example, a major sporting event. Now, what you're focused on is there are certain events on which in which you individually participate, and there are certain events or for which you are preparing for. They have to be team-based events. So if I look at, if you're preparing for, say, for example, something to do with high jump, or something to do with, say, 100 meters, sprint, looking at the own aspect of how you would increase your speed, how would you look at trimming the time, and in terms of the seconds that you want to shave off from a point of view of going as close as to the world record set, or the time which has been set as a European record. Now, those sports wherein you are actually looking at focusing on improving your own skills, and you're working with your own self, and most of the activities and the things that you do are related to in gaining improvements in your ability to be able to run fast, is nothing but a process of personal development. Now, if I give you another example, if you pick up the sport of cycling, for example, and you pick up the sport of, say, for example, you're going to play, say, football. In that case, it is more of personal and professional development, is because you're going to be playing personally, but you'll also be playing as a part of an overall team. And that is where, if the team performs well, then your performance is also exemplified, or is, also, it also gains, let's say, if the team wins, you also win. But if the team loses, then also you as a performer, even if you performed extremely well, you've scored goals and all that, it still does not, make the end differences, because the team has lost overall. So when you look at the process of personal development, it is a set of activities which are directly related to yourself. And when you look at the process of, professional development, you're looking at developing yourself professionally from a standpoint of, from a viewpoint of, benchmarking it externally with, either you're a part of a large team, a part of, as you work within a particular department, you're one of the employees in that department. If you work within the company's branch office, you're one of the employee working within the branch office. So if everybody achieves, certain goals and targets set, then as a result, the whole company or the department achieves the goal. And as a department achieves the goal, the whole company is able to achieve or realize better goals, which means increments, salaries, salary increments, bonuses, and incentive for everyone within the company. But when it comes to individual initiative, then it is primarily, say, for example, you exceeded your sales target quota. That means you're going to benefit, you're going to get the incentive. As against, if the team meets the target, then everybody within the team gets the incentive, or gets the benefit of having a large bonus or a large pot in terms of reward. Is that clear enough?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if I stretch this personal development into something called a plan, which is nothing but an area or a series of improvement that you intend to achieve over a period of time, and that would become nothing but a personal plan. Say, for example, just again, an often example would be that if somebody is trying to lose weight, or if you're trying to gain weight because you want to build muscle, then what you're looking at doing is, that is something that cannot happen overnight. So what you do is you break that down into some sort of a series of activities, which when accomplished will actually lead to you achieving that objective. That bit would then be called a plan. So similarly, a PDP is nothing but a series of activities which basically are jotted down, or you jot them on a piece of paper, and then you define the main objectives, and against which you set targets. And then as you progress along achieving those smaller aims and objectives which help you achieve the macro objective, is then nothing but classified as something called a development plan. Now, a PDP also, to a certain extent, is something called a reflective document. Can you think of why is it called a reflective document in some cases? Can you think of any reasons, or a few reasons wherein it becomes a reflective document or a reflective essay to a certain extent?
Like, sir, like if we're doing personal development, is definitely reflective. Making us better person. Like whatever we think about it, like we're doing some plans. We're making some plans to make it ourselves better. So it's definitely reflecting on our personality. And if we're working in a professional environment, it's definitely like affecting our environment, like our business or our environment or wherever we're working.
That is correct. Phil, any comments on that?
Well, yes, I agree. It basically reflects on what you've learned so far, your current skills.
Spot on.
A bit like a skills matrix.
That is correct. Yes. So spot on. So essentially, when we say reflection, reflection is nothing but you're going to talk with a bit of a hindsight into something which you had an experience of, or you've had some prior learning about. So in some cases, when we start with the PDP, what we look at is we start with this SWOT analysis of our strengths and weaknesses. And when you identify those strengths and weaknesses, you know why they are your strengths and why they are your weaknesses. And that is why it is a reflective document to begin with. At some stage, you start on the reflection of where you are, what you have done, or what you have accomplished, and at that stage, it then starts to become an aspirational document because you start to write down things that you want to acquire, skills that you want to get, and then at some stage where you want to reach. So it could be a document wherein you personal reflection, and at some stage it talks about your presence in terms of your present circumstances, and then what you want to achieve in the future is also documented on the PDP. So it basically represents almost like 3 phases, in terms of your plan. So what is your past to a certain extent, the present, and it also looks at documenting your future. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, good sir. Now, what we also look at is, I think one of the key things that we have to capture in this particular document is we need to look at existing performance, and we need to have some evidence which kind of supports this existing performance. So an example here is, if I say I have good negotiation skills, and I start by doing my SWOT analysis and say I have good communication skill, I have good listening skills, I have time management skills. So these are all skills that you're talking about. But what is the evidence you're able to put against these skills will actually come out that whether you have these skills or you don't have these skills. So I need to quote a relevant example when I say I have time management skills. So the example would be when I claim that in my CV or when I document one of my strengths that I have good time management skills, what I should be able to back it up as an evidence would be from that in my 5 years of work experience so far, I have never been late to the office. Or if I have got maybe a commendation letter or maybe some sort of an acknowledgement from my manager that this person has never been late to the office. That would then classify as an evidence which would ratify that you definitely have something called time management skills. Now, this could be just in the case of punctuality, but it could have various meanings when I look at time management, that I'm able to deliver every project on time. And what that ratification would be, that because you've done so many projects on time, at every stage of your performance appraisal, you have been, it has been acknowledged, or in some cases, you've been rewarded by some additional, maybe financial monetary reward, saying that, okay, because of your achievements of targets and objectives happening on time, delivery of projects on time, the company is pleased to offer you maybe a promotion, pleased to offer you a reward, pleased to offer you something. And that then becomes something called evidence. And once that evidence is documented, then at some stage, what you can say is very clearly that these are skills I possess. Is that something clear enough?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. We get to see that at times, we mention a lot of things in our CV that I have this, I have that. But at some stage, when you face an interview, or when you basically go out and you face an interview when you applied for a new job, what the interviewee essentially ends up checking or asking you questions about in terms of interrogation is, how does he or she check that you have this skill? They will ask you questions. Can you document this? Or can you give me an example of why, and why do you consider saying, or why have you written saying that you have this skill? Isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Now, there are skills which are required because as a process, what we've seen is in this particular unit, there is something called learning that will come across repeatedly. Now, we as individuals, as a part of team, as a part of a bigger set of organization, or as a part of a department, whatever it is, when we work professionally, we are a part of something. Now, that process means that we are continuously learning throughout that duration in terms of when we are role or that function, but also throughout our lives in terms of having learning. And that process wherein you keep acquiring new things or new abilities, and we class them as new skills at some stage, would then lead you to maybe higher set of roles and responsibilities. Correct?
Yes.
An example here would be that at some stage, when I, say for example, if we've just completed our studies, we're just freshly coming out of the uni, and what we then tend to do is we apply for jobs, we end up getting some sort of graduate job, management trainee jobs, or basically apprenticeship roles. But at some stage, after 1 year, 2 years of working in that particular role, what we tend to see is that as we acquire, become more confident and acquire skills which help us kind of give that confidence that I'm able to do this job well, and I'm able to do this job very well. At some stage, the company then looks at bringing you on roles, or maybe giving you a promotion, or taking you on board from being an apprentice or a trainee to an employee. And that transition happens throughout our professional life when we look at working within an organization, whether it's your own business, whether you're self-employed, working for a company or an organization, or whatever it is. And that process, when we continuously keep, acquiring skills, and then at the end of it, these skills help us to take advanced level jobs or get more roles and responsibilities. That means sometime back, after 5 years of experience, you became a supervisor. At 10 years, you became a manager. You would look back with reflection and say that, okay, when I started, I used to only do administrative jobs, or look at filing and look at phone calls and stuff. But today I'm the manager of this department, and I manage, say 20 employees or 5 employees, whatever it is. An example, I manage people. I have decision-making responsibility. I have access to the management, and at some stage, these skills that you've acquired with experience over the years have helped you move into better position, and also helped you acquire new skills. And these skills, at the end of it, have allowed you to gain more responsibility and kind of a senior role within the organization. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in most organizations, when you join, what tends to happen is, when during the induction process, when you join a company or when you start working for a company, during the process of induction, most companies give you some sort of an employee handbook, and that employee handbook has various policies, processes, things that you have to adhere to, and various procedures in place. If you require this, or should you require leave. Once you've understood that, at some stage, what you do is you go through the process of becoming a part and parcel of that organization, and then the organization keeps training you through the process of training and development. You attend short trainings, long-term trainings throughout the process that you're working within the organization. And the reason why they do this process of T&D, training and development, is to make sure that the individual working in that particular role and having that particular responsibility is able to kind of work efficiently, productively, so that overall goals set by the management are always met. And it's the role of the HR department to put this plan in place, or help you develop a PDP when you join an organization, or when you join a particular function within an organization at some stage, and the PDPs then become a part of your annual appraisals. That means if I'm a graduate trainee, somebody who's new to the organization, I might not have a PDP in the initial beginning, but once I go through the probation period of 3 months or 6 months, then the HR would sit down with me, or my line manager would sit down with me, and they would put this CPD, Career Professional Development Plan, or basically a continuous development plan in place, so that they can move me from stage A or point A to point B, and then from then on to point C, and then it helps me progressively get more responsibilities, and I become a part and parcel of the organization. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, in terms of what are the main things that we've covered, these 5 things that we have looked at, which are your kind of columns, or 5 major headings in the PDP, is where am I now? That means you have to come to a conclusion of a kind of a true reflection of where am I now in terms of my journey. So if you say that you are a manager, if you say you're a supervisor, if you say that I'm a worker, you have to at some stage very clearly identify that where are you now in terms of the overall organization, or in terms of the overall hierarchy of the organization. Sometimes in our day-to-day lives, we normally do mention, I do understand the scheme of things, but what I want to know is, where am I in those scheme of things? Where am I standing in terms of your plans? Do you hear this term or not? Do you come across this term sometimes?
Yeah.
Sometimes what happens is, in your daily transactions, or in your daily, in our daily lives, what we tend to see is, sometimes you want to see the bigger picture, right? But once you see the bigger picture, what tends to happen is that you sometimes question that bigger picture, saying that, okay, now I understand the bigger picture, but can you tell me where am I now in that bigger picture? Correct? You want to know what exactly is your role in that particular, overall So here, what you have to clearly identify is where am I now? And that is the starting point of looking at developing a PDP, which is you have to identify clearly your presence. Okay. The second thing that I look at is, because as individuals, we have ambitions, as individuals, we have aspirations. What we then do is we look at where I want to be in, say, 3 years. I'm pretty sure that you must have come across this question when you have faced maybe interviews in that where they normally end up asking you always, where do you see yourself in 3 years? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Have you come across this situation where this question has been posed to you at some stage in the interview process?
Like when I was coming from Pakistan to here, so they asked me, what you want to do after your graduation?
Right, okay. And Phil, in your case?
Not in interview processes, but I have been asked that question in like college courses, like where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Absolutely correct. So this particular question is a very cliched question which gets asked in most situations. And the reason why the organizations will ask you this question, whether you're facing an interview, I think in most cases, it normally is asked when you are in some sort of an interview situation. It could be an immigration interview, it could be a job interview, it could be an interview that you're doing to maybe bid for a project, or, in general, if you're sitting down as friends and, there is a conversation happening that, this was the thing and, at some stage I want to do this. And this is a question which gets, the reason why you get this question always is that from an organizational perspective, when they look at the whole process of recruitment and selection, they want to clearly know whether when they hire you as an individual, that whether the individual is ambitious, is highly ambitious, or is that individual or that person going to be coming in and sitting and not disturbing the apple cart as far as the organization is concerned. So this question has many connotations in terms of its interpretation, but in general, what it is done, what this question poses and what the inflection the interviewee actually wants to take from it is that if I recruit this person and put him in this particular role, will this individual be content in that role for, say, a time frame of 3 years? If they ask you the question, where do you see yourself in 3 years? To me, it gives a straight hint that they are looking at somebody who can come in, settle in this role for a period of 3 years before asking for a promotion or asking for a rise. Do you see that? Yeah. Sometimes you only get asked, where do you see yourself in 12 months or in 12 to 18 months? And in certain cases, it is a direct indication where they are looking at bringing and what kind of an individual they are looking at bringing in, so that they have somebody who is relaxed, they have somebody who is ambitious, but is able to come in and involve himself or herself into the processes of the organizations, and then is able to provide a stable, become a stable employee in that particular role for that period of those many years. So here, the second column that is where I say, where am I now? And the second is where. A simple example of this could be that if you're learning to drive, for example, you at some stage would say, where am I now? I can drive a bicycle, I can drive a, a motorbike or something like that, but I can't drive a car. So at some stage, what you want to look at is you want to be in a position wherein you're able to drive a car. And that is what is nothing but who I want to be. And that position could be in 3 months, 2 months, 6 months, 4 weeks, depending on how aggressively you follow that goal or you define it in terms of achievable goal. Is what is that is that the objective of understanding where I want to be in that time frame. Then the third column we have spoken about is what skills, knowledge, attributes will I need to get there. That means if I'm wanting to learn to drive, that I need to pass a theory test, and these are the various milestones that you have to be able to achieve, and the skills that you have to be able to acquire to read the signs, the national motorway signs, and toll carriageway signs, blah blah blah. And that is where, when you achieve all this, you are in a comfortable position to say that I have acquired these skills and I've traversed that path, and now I'm confident enough to say that I'm going to be able to complete my practical. And the fourth and the fifth columns, self-explanatory, is how might my work change in the next few years. So when I look at that template wherein it talks about looking at the success criteria. That success criteria is because you're planning for a long term, from a long term perspective, that you want to get to that particular place, you will plans, or you will put concrete kind of plans or steps or points in place to be able to achieve that in the next few years. And when I say next few years, it is predominantly from a point of view of job, but it could be next few years if you're learning a language. It could be next few years if you're, say, for example, one of the things which I will mention is my father-in-law was looking at, climbing the Mount Kilimanjaro in Kenya. So he was setting a plan in place that he wanted to do this in the next 3 years. He wants to be physically fit without the need of oxygen, go up to 3,000 meters and climb the highest mountain in Africa. So when you look at that, it is a process, and sometimes your timelines can be in weeks, can be days, can be weeks, can be months, can be years. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I can't say I want to become a chief executive tomorrow. I can be realistic that I've joined the organization in a year, but to become and achieve that position of being the managing director, the chief executive of the organization, might take 15, 20, 25 years of work and experience to get to that position. Can you see that context?
Yes, sir.
Yeah? Okay. And the last column that we look at is something which is how can I achieve my goals? So here we have put down the opportunities and the areas of strengths, and in some cases the resources that we need, formal trainings that we need to be able to achieve that objective, and that is what is also put down in the PDP. Because if I say that I want to become a public presenter, if Jeremy Corbyn tomorrow says that I want to improve my public image, I want public to like me, people to like me in general, by far, and they have to compare. He has to look at basic things. And I think when we looked at that debate of David Cameron, actually in the Prime Minister's question, mentioning that, my humble, opponent on the other side first needs to dress up in a suit, wear a tie and things like that. So what he did was he made a very indirect comment and a very insulting comment at that point in time during the Prime Minister's debate to basically highlight that, you do not kind of even comply with the basics of, sing the national anthem and, wear a suit and a tie. How would you look at leading the party if you can't, there were lots of meanings to it. So here I have to be realistic. And when I look at achieving my goals, I have to put it down in terms of something called SMART objectives that we have read before. So, something that make use of when we kind of develop our PDP as well. Is that okay?
Yes.
Now, this particular diagram that we see here, which is a review process. Now, the reason why we look at because why we call this as a working document is that things change on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, monthly basis. Now, here what we do is we do a review after we've developed the first draft of our PDP. We do a continuous review every 3 months, 6 months, 12 monthly, or annually as we call it. The reason why we want to do this review is we want to continuously monitor, reflect, and also change our goals depending on what we are achieving and what we are not able to achieve. So the 4-step process that we look at in terms of reviewing the PDP is identify, we look at planning, replanning in some cases, we put those plans into action, and then at some stage we measure those plans against the objective set to basically review and reflect on those plans. And this particular process is nothing but a continuous process of change or updates which we tend to do in terms of our PDP, also in terms of our personal development plan. If I say that I made my PDP and you haven't reviewed it or I haven't read it for a number of months or number of years, then that plan might become redundant in the sense that your situation 6 months back or situation 12 months back or 18 months back would have been very different to the situation that you're currently in. And if you do not have this document reviewed, and that's the whole reason of calling it a working document, it sometimes tends to happen is that you kind of lose the shine in terms of, let's put it this way, that if I made as an exercise my PDP when I was studying, and then I did not make a plan or a personal development plan for the next couple of years, and then end up having one when I was maybe a part of the organization or started to work. Now, in between the gap areas, they tend to be areas which then kind of are reflected as suddenly you get a job, email in your, you get an email from a recruiter which says, this is a new role which has come up. Would you be interested? Can you send a copy of your CV to me? And you suddenly realize Okay, for me, I haven't updated my CV for the last 5 years. So CV, your curriculum vitae, could to be a certain extent could also be called a personal development plan, is because it's an accurate reflection of where you are in your journey of lifelong learning, and that depicts to a certain extent the skills, the qualities, the abilities that you've acquired because of the work that you've done. And it also can be classified as something called a personal development plan. Correct? And this particular process of how to review this plan is basically nothing but a continuous process in thus these 4 stages, when you identify and basically look at what are the development needs that you, or basically need development analysis that we do, which is called DNA. Identify, which is nothing but SWOT analysis. Once we've identified them, we try and reduce our weaknesses, reduce the threats, and then try and look at some training and development to try and develop those weaknesses into areas of weakness which can either be neutralized or to a certain extent developed into strength areas. Now, an example that I would give here is how do you review this? Maybe when you look at when you started your work as a fresher, you started to work within an organization, and at some stage you realize that I've got good skills in terms of being a part of a team, but at some stage when you start performing, you start excelling, your work becomes slightly different from your colleagues, you get interested in more roles and responsibilities. What you get to see is that there are things that you need to develop which will help you work with your colleagues, but work with them in a fashion wherein you're seen to be supervising them because of the responsibilities entrusted on you. Now, process wherein you realize this at some stage, wherein because the manager has more confidence on you and you've been able to deliver for the number of years, and he then starts trusting you with more responsibilities, your interaction with your colleagues to a certain extent begins to change. Because in some cases you're looking at delegating, in some cases you're working as a part of team, and in some cases you're looking at reviewing. And when you get to that stage, you realize that you do not have team leadership skills. And that is where the organization picks it up, puts you into a training and development plan, and they see that, okay, the individual has been working within Tesco, say, for 5 years. He has done his job quite well. He's able to take on responsibilities. He's able to, work with his seniors, peers, and colleagues. And at some stage, they say, okay, he's a bright spot. He needs to be developed further in the organization, and they start to give you some responsibilities in terms of team management. And when they realize that there's a gap, that you have not had any training on this, this is what is picked up through the continuous review process. When you have your appraisals and you sit down with your line managers, or you sit down with your immediate managers when you have appraisals, and when they pick this up, they put this into your PDP, and then with the PDP align some sort of a training and development, so that you're able to then develop this skill to be able to move further in the organization. Is that clear enough?
Yeah.
Yeah, and this individual step that we look at, individual areas that we look at are areas. The first area is identify. That means what they will try and ask you to do is do a self-assessment skills audit. And this is something that I want to show you. Give me 1 second. I've just unshared my screen. I want to show you a skills audit template. I think Phil, I showed it to you last time. So here, if I share my screen back, and when we look at this, this is a standard template through which we'll look at doing a bit of a skills audit. Can you see this now?
Yeah.
Now, what we want to be able to do is, from a point of view of a student, I have defined it as a skills audit template, but in the remit of somebody who's doing a business management course like you are doing and Phil is doing, and a couple of other students who are studying with us. What we want to be able to do is see if you're able to develop the relevant knowledge for that particular unit to be able to do your assignments. And are we delivering to the plan so that you're able to develop that knowledge to be able to do the assignments? So here in the skills, what I'm looking at doing is I'm looking at the knowledge and skills which I consider important for my current studies. Right? So one of the key skills that you would put down in the audit would be that you should be able to do academic writing. So when you look at academic writing, that is considered as one of the key skills that you need to have as far as current studies are concerned. How about referencing skills? Are key skills. rate yourself against how is your referencing skills in terms of on a scale to 1 to 5, or how is your writing skills when you're looking at coming to assignments on a scale of 1 to 5. So similarly, what we can do is we can define a number of skills and we can rate them on a scale of 1 to 5, and this is nothing but something called a skills audit. Is that okay? So basically this 4-step process, which I'm going to send you on the email, talks about each of these processes. And what we do is we identify areas at the end of it. After the the review process, what we end up doing is we identify some of these areas which we then take towards our PDP to develop it further. Okay, these are areas that I've done a skills audit of, and I think I'm poor. I need to improve. Rather than me say poor, I need to improve my presentation skills. I need to improve my referencing skill. I might need to look at improving my academic skill in terms of writing, not with I, we, but as third person, which is required in the assignment. And these are areas which you will put down in your PDP. Is that okay?
Yep.
And this whole process of developing the personal development plan starts with these 3-4 basic tools and techniques, things like the SWOT analysis, the skills audit, and then you put this together into a document which then becomes a PDP. So these documents basically provide you the inputs on the basis of ranking or on the basis of capturing that you're able to do in terms of where you are. And when you put that into the document, it becomes nothing but a professional or a personal development document, because you define where are you in terms of your present, in terms where you want to go in the future, and because of which what you will be able to achieve. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yes.
So I think what I want to now do is, obviously it brings us to this end of this particular topic. What I want to be able to do is, when I send you this email just immediately after the session, I'm going to email you this presentation, the skills audit. Phil, you already have the PDP and the SWOT analysis template.
Yeah.
Correct. So my suggestion to you would be on this weekend, maybe sit down and fill that SWOT template up, fill that, prepare and make that PDP, and do a skills audit in terms of identifying the key attributes that you're going to rank your skills against. Now, the other thing which I'll point out when you do a skills audit is sometimes you ask others to basically help you do the skill audit. Right? And the reason why you sometimes go to others to ask them to fill this form up is because you want to get not just your opinion and your area that this is something which is a skill with me, but what you do is you go to others to be able to get a 360-degree feedback of, if your assessment is that you have excellent IT skills, what is your friend or your colleague's assessment of where you are on your IT skill. So you will ask them to also do an audit for you, and that is something which completes a skill audit. That means it's not just your own opinion, but it also is the opinion of your friends and your colleagues that you work with, and they kind of identify, help you identify for sure that this is your skill, this is your strength, this is your weakness, this is where you kind of shy away from areas and you feel this is a threat, and that's how a fuller scheme of skill audit is done. Is that okay? So I'm going to send you this template as well, which is a skills audit, which was done by one of the students. And what he organized his skills audit was in the area of organization of learning, information seeking skills, reading and note making, writing skills, spoken communication, IT, and working with numbers. And these are broad areas that you need to create to try and understand where are your gap areas. And this, along with your SWOT, will firm up your PDP. Is that okay?
Yeah.
For today's session, I'm going to stop here. What I would expect you to do is, when I send you these templates, to look at these as templates and then create something which will help you identify and do your SWOT analysis, do your skills audit. It could be asking your friend, your friends and family to do your skill audit for you. And then once you've got that, compile it and then try and create a draft PDP for the next session. And in that draft PDP, what I'm going to do is, we're going to look at the process of reviewing and relate it to the work-based problems that we face in the organization, and how the PDP or the personal development plan, training and development, help you solve those problems. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much for joining in. And what I'm going to do is send you this email straight away after the session. As I mentioned, and then I will catch up with you next week. Any questions, queries, please feel free to email, and I will try and come back to you with some more, handout or reading material so that you can, kind of concrete your knowledge on that particular area which your query is in.